Observe the contemporary man. He is often portrayed as a figure of strength, resilience, and stoicism, navigating the external world with a perceived sense of control and self-sufficiency. This pervasive image, deeply ingrained in cultural narratives, suggests an individual impervious to the emotional ebbs and flows that define much of human experience. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade, whether of unwavering provider, fearless adventurer, or unshakable leader, lies a complex landscape of emotion, longing, and unspoken struggle. This internal world, often obscured by the societal expectations, personal conditioning, and an inherent reticence to display vulnerability, represents a hidden psychology that yearns for understanding, recognition, and authentic expression. Modern psychology offers robust frameworks to dissect these intricate patterns, from the profound impact of early attachment experiences on relational dynamics to the pervasive pressures of gender roles that dictate acceptable emotional displays. Simultaneously, spiritual traditions across millennia have explored the very essence of masculinity, not merely as a social construct but as a profound journey of the soul, grappling with the demands of ego, the pursuit of purpose, and the yearning for the divine. The seemingly disparate realms of psychological science and spiritual wisdom, in fact, converge to illuminate the profound inner life of men, revealing pathways not just to healing from past wounds, but to a deeper, more integrated, and ultimately more authentic sense of self. This essay embarks on an exploration of this hidden psychology, weaving together insights from cutting-edge psychological research with the timeless wisdom of diverse spiritual traditions. Our purpose is to deconstruct the prevailing narratives of masculinity, which often limit men to narrow definitions of strength and self-reliance, revealing instead the intricate interplay of developmental experiences, pervasive societal conditioning, nuanced neurobiological factors, and the inherent spiritual quest that collectively shapes men's inner lives. We will argue that many of the challenges men face today, from pervasive emotional suppression and chronic relational difficulties to the existential search for meaning and purpose in a rapidly changing world, are best understood not as isolated issues to be addressed symptomatically, but as complex manifestations of both unresolved psychological wounds and unacknowledged spiritual yearnings. By integrating these two powerful perspectives, we aim to offer a more holistic, nuanced, and compassionate understanding of men's journey toward wholeness, authenticity, and spiritual awakening, inviting a deeper empathy for the struggles and triumphs beneath the surface. From a psychological standpoint, we will delve into the foundational theories that illuminate male experience with remarkable clarity. This includes a close examination of the attachment theory, exploring how early relational patterns with primary caregivers profoundly influence men's capacity for intimacy, vulnerability, and authentic emotional expression throughout their entire lives, often leading to avoidant or anxious attachment styles. We will investigate the pervasive impact of social learning theory and gender role socialization, analyzing how cultural norms and expectations of masculinity, often emphasizing stoicism, competitiveness, self-sufficiency, and emotional restraint, are internalized and shape identity and behavior from early childhood, frequently at the cost of emotional fluency. Furthermore, we will touch upon the neurobiological underpinnings of male psychology, considering the intricate roles of hormones like testosterone and cortisol, specific brain structures such as the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, and stress response systems in influencing emotional regulation, risk-taking behavior, and interpersonal dynamics. Finally, we will draw from more Jungian archetypal psychology, exploring the universal patterns of the sacred masculine, e.g., the warrior, king, magician, lover, and the shadow, the unacknowledged, often repressed aspects of the self that reside within the male psyche, offering a powerful lens to understand deeper motivations, unconscious drives, and the quest for individuation. Complementing these incisive psychological insights, we will turn to a rich tapestry of spiritual traditions, each offering a unique and profound perspective on the masculine journey. Buddhist teachings will guide us in understanding the nature of ego, attachment, and suffering, particularly how craving for success, control, recognition, and aversion to weakness, failure, emotional pain manifest in male striving and emotional repression, perpetuating a cycle of dissatisfaction. From the book Christian Contemplative Wisdom, we will explore timeless themes of surrender, grace, and the dark night of the soul, recognizing the profound spiritual strength found not in outward dominance, but in vulnerability, humility, and a deep reliance on something greater than oneself. Islamic and Sufi mysticism will offer insights into the purification of the nafs, the ego self, and the yearning for divine remembrance, dhikr, revealing a path beyond worldly attachments and toward inner peace and spiritual union. Hindu and Vedantic philosophy will illuminate concepts of dharma, righteous action and purpose, karma, the law of cause and effect, and the pursuit of self-realization, moksha, connecting individual purpose to universal consciousness and the transcendence of illusion. Finally, existential philosophy will challenge us to confront fundamental questions of meaning, authenticity, freedom, and responsibility, which resonate deeply with many men's struggles for identity and purpose in a postmodern, often secular world that can feel devoid of inherent meaning. Our integration approach will not merely present psychology and spirituality side by side, but will actively seek their profound points of convergence and complementarity. We will illustrate how psychological diagnoses often mirror spiritual conditions, for instance, how chronic anxiety or depression can reflect a spiritual unease or a disconnection from one's deeper purpose, and how spiritual practices can provide profound tools for psychological healing, such as mindfulness for emotional regulation or forgiveness for past trauma. The ensuing chapters will systematically unpack these dimensions. Chapter 2 will establish the core psychological and spiritual frameworks in greater detail, laying the theoretical groundwork. Chapter 3 will explore modern manifestations of men's hidden struggles, drawing from contemporary research, clinical observations, and cultural phenomena. Chapter 4 will offer illustrative examples from history, clinical practice, and modern life to bring these complex theories to life through relatable narratives. Chapter 5 will then provide practical integration strategies, blending evidence-based therapeutic interventions with contemplative practices for holistic well-being and personal growth. Ultimately, this essay aims to foster a more nuanced, empathetic, and empowering understanding of men, inviting both men themselves and those who interact with them, partners, family, friends, and colleagues, to look beyond the surface, to honor the unseen depths, and to embark on a journey of profound healing, authentic self-discovery, and spiritual awakening. Our exploration into the intricate tapestry of the male psyche necessitates an initial foray into the foundational psychological frameworks that have, for decades, sought to demystify the origins of human behavior and relational patterns, illuminating the often obscured landscape of masculine interiority. These theoretical constructs, far from being mere academic abstractions, provide the essential conceptual lenses through which we can begin to comprehend the deeply embedded, often unconscious mechanisms that shape a man's emotional experience, his relational dynamics, and his very sense of self. It is through this rigorous psychological analysis that we uncover the initial strata of the hidden psychology, revealing how early experiences, societal conditioning, neurobiological predispositions, and the collective unconscious coalesce to form the complex, often paradoxical inner world of the contemporary man. We commence our psychological exegesis with attachment theory, a paradigm posited by John Bowlby and further developed by Mary Ainsworth, which offers profound insights into the genesis of relational patterns and emotional regulation, particularly as they manifest in adult men. At its core, attachment theory asserts that the quality of early relational experiences with primary caregivers fundamentally shapes an individual's internal working models, cognitive and affective schemas that dictate expectations for self, others, and relationships. For men, the implications of these early templates are particularly salient, often contributing to the very reticence and emotional guardedness that characterize the hidden psychology. A child who experiences consistent, sensitive, and responsive care tends to develop a secure attachment style, fostering a robust capacity for intimacy, emotional expression, and resilience in the face of relational challenges. Conversely, inconsistent, rejecting, or intrusive care can lead to insecure attachment styles, anxious, preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, or fearful avoidant, each with distinct, often debilitating consequences for emotional well-being and relational health. Observe the contemporary man, frequently depicted as self-sufficient and emotionally impervious. This outward stoicism, we contend, often belies an underlying dismissive avoidant attachment style, painstakingly cultivated through early experiences where expressions of vulnerability were met with dismissal, criticism, or even punishment. Such formative conditioning teaches a boy that dependency is a weakness, that emotional needs are burdens, and that self-reliance is the only path to safety and acceptance. Consequently, as men mature, they may develop a powerful, often unconscious strategy of emotional deactivation, suppressing feelings, minimizing the importance of close relationships, and maintaining a psychological distance to preempt perceived rejection or engulfment. This avoidance, while serving as a protective mechanism in the short term, simultaneously erects formidable barriers to genuine intimacy, fostering a profound sense of isolation and an unacknowledged longing for connection that remains hidden beneath layers of practiced indifference. The internal working model of the dismissive avoidant man often dictates that others are unreliable or intrusive, and that he himself is inherently capable of handling life alone, thus perpetuating a cycle of emotional self-sufficiency that paradoxically starves the innate human need for belonging and deep relational communion. This unfulfilled yearning for authentic connection constitutes a significant, yet largely unarticulated component of his hidden psychology. Building upon the foundational insights of attachment theory, we turn our attention to social learning theory, a framework pioneered by Albert Bandura, which illuminates the powerful role of observation, imitation, and reinforcement in shaping gender roles and behavioral repertoires. This theory posits that individuals acquire behaviors, attitudes, and emotional responses through observing others and experiencing the consequences of their own actions. For men, the process of gender socialization, commencing from infancy, is a particularly potent force, meticulously molding the contours of masculine identity in accordance with prevailing societal norms. From playgrounds to media portrayals, boys are inundated with explicit and implicit messages about how to be a man. They observe fathers, peers, and cultural icons embodying traits such as physical strength, competitiveness, stoicism, and a disavowal of feminine characteristics like emotional expressiveness, empathy, and vulnerability. These observations are often reinforced by positive affirmations when they conform, "be a man," and negative sanctions when they deviate, "don't be a crybaby." The cumulative effect of this pervasive social learning is the internalization of a narrow, often rigid script for masculinity. Boys learn to suppress what is deemed unmanly. Tears, fear, tenderness, the open articulation of emotional pain, and to cultivate traits that align with a culturally prescribed ideal of strength and self-control. This process, while appearing to foster resilience, simultaneously compels men to disown significant portions of their authentic emotional landscape, relegating them to the psychological periphery. The stoic facade so emblematic of the contemporary man is not an inherent trait, but a meticulously constructed performance, a learned response designed to navigate a world that often punishes emotional transparency in men. The hidden cost of this performance is profound, a pervasive emotional illiteracy, an inability to accurately identify, process, and articulate complex internal states. This deficit in emotional fluency can lead to a host of internal struggles, from chronic anxiety and depression, often masked by anger or withdrawal, to an inability to forge deep empathic connections. The hidden psychology in this context is the repository of these unexpressed emotions, these unacknowledged vulnerabilities, and the profound internal conflict between the authentic self and the socially mandated self. The pressure to conform to this narrow gender script can also lead to a phenomenon where men may pathologize their own natural inclinations towards tenderness or a desire for deeper emotional engagement, viewing them as personal failures rather than inherent human needs. While attachment and social learning theories elucidate the environmental and experiential factors shaping the male psyche, a holistic understanding necessitates an acknowledgement of the neurobiological underpinnings that interact with these external forces. It is crucial to emphasize that biology is not destiny, but rather a complex interplay of genetic predispositions, hormonal influences, and neural architecture that is profoundly modulated by environmental input and lived experience. Research in neuroendocrinology and neuroimaging suggests that certain biological differences, while often subtle, can influence emotional processing, stress response, and social cognition. For instance, the influence of sex hormones, particularly testosterone, is often cited in discussions of male behavior, potentially affecting aggression, risk-taking, and dominance behaviors. However, the interpretation of such influences must be nuanced, recognizing that hormonal levels themselves are responsive to social and psychological factors. Furthermore, studies on brain structure and function have identified average differences in regions associated with emotion regulation, e.g., the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, empathy, e.g., mirror neuron systems, and social cognition between sexes. While the functional significance of these differences is still a subject of ongoing research, it is plausible that they may, in conjunction with societal conditioning, contribute to distinct patterns of emotional processing and expression in men. For example, if there is a neurobiological predisposition for men to process certain emotions in a more internally focused or less verbally expressive manner, this predisposition can be significantly amplified by social learning that discourages outward emotionality. The hidden aspect here lies in the unconscious interplay between these biological predispositions and the powerful shaping forces of culture. A man may experience an emotion such as fear or sadness, but due to learned suppression and a possible neurobiological tendency towards internal processing, the emotion remains largely unarticulated, unacknowledged, and thus hidden from both himself and others. This creates an internal dissonance where an innate biological experience is met with a learned suppression, leading to unresolved emotional states that contribute to the hidden landscape of his inner world. Finally, we delve into the profound depths of Jungian archetypal psychology, a theoretical framework that transcends the purely personal and developmental, venturing into the collective unconscious to explore universal patterns of human experience. Carl Jung posited the existence of archetypes, primordial images and patterns of thought that reside in the collective unconscious, influencing our perceptions, emotions, and behaviors. For men, two particularly salient archetypes illuminate the hidden psychology: the sacred masculine and the shadow. The sacred masculine represents the archetypal potential for healthy, integrated masculine expression. It encompasses qualities such as strength tempered with compassion, courage guided by wisdom, protection rooted in love, creative power, integrity, and a profound connection to purpose and spirit. Archetypal images like the king, wise leadership, order; the warrior, courage, discipline, protection; the lover, passion, connection, creativity; and the magician, knowledge, insight, transformation, represent facets of this integrated masculinity. However, in contemporary society, the healthy expression of the sacred masculine is often distorted, inhibited, or even pathologized. Men may be encouraged to embody only fragmented aspects: the aggressive warrior without compassion, the domineering king without wisdom, the detached magician without heart, leading to an imbalanced and often destructive manifestation of masculine energy. The hidden psychology, in this context, grapples with the unfulfilled potential of the sacred masculine, the yearning for wholeness and authentic power that remains largely uncultivated or misdirected. This manifests as a profound existential unease, a sense of lacking purpose or genuine connection, even amidst a material success. Complementing this is the archetype of the shadow, which Jung defined as the unconscious, repressed, and disowned aspects of the personality. These are the traits, desires, and emotions that the ego deems unacceptable or incompatible with its self-image, often because they contradict societal or personal ideals. For men, the shadow frequently harbors qualities such as vulnerability, fear, weakness, dependency, precisely those aspects that social learning theory identifies as being suppressed during gender socialization. The shadow also contains less desirable traits like aggression, envy, narcissism, and destructive impulses, which, when unacknowledged, can erupt in pathological ways. The hidden psychology is, in many respects, the very domain of the unintegrated shadow. When a man denies or represses these disowned aspects, they do not disappear. Rather, they operate from the unconscious, manifesting indirectly through projections onto others, self-sabotaging behaviors, chronic emotional distress, or sudden, inexplicable outbursts. The fear of confronting one's shadow, the fear of appearing weak or unmanly, is a powerful barrier to psychological wholeness. The journey of shadow integration therefore becomes paramount, consciously acknowledging, accepting, and integrating these disowned parts of the self into a more complete and authentic identity. This process is not about becoming good, but becoming whole, recognizing that even the darkest aspects of the self hold vital energy and information necessary for individuation and self-realization. The unacknowledged shadow represents a vast, unmapped territory within the hidden psychology, holding both potential for destruction and the keys to profound transformation. In synthesizing these psychological frameworks, we discern a common thread: The male psyche, shaped by early relational experiences, rigorously conditioned by societal norms, influenced by neurobiological predispositions, and profoundly impacted by archetypal forces, constructs a complex internal world. This world is often characterized by a profound disjunction between outward presentation and inner reality, between conscious awareness and unconscious processes. The hidden psychology is thus the repository of unexpressed emotions, unacknowledged longings, disowned vulnerabilities, and the latent potential for authentic self-expression. It is a landscape of internal conflict, where the innate human need for connection and wholeness battles against the formidable forces of suppression and societal expectation. Understanding these psychological underpinnings is not merely an academic exercise. It is an essential first step towards illuminating the path to healing, fostering greater self-awareness, and ultimately allowing men to reclaim the richness and complexity of their full humanity. Our subsequent chapters will build upon this psychological foundation, exploring how spiritual traditions offer complementary wisdom and practices for navigating these internal landscapes and fostering deeper integration. Having meticulously unpacked the psychological scaffolding that underpins the contemporary man's hidden interiority, from the often unseen architecture of dismissive avoidant attachment to the pervasive conditioning of social learning theory, the subtle predispositions of neurobiological factors, and the formidable influence of Jungian archetypes, we arrive at a profound realization. A purely psychological lens, however incisive, remains inherently incomplete. The intricate tapestry of human experience, particularly the male journey towards self-actualization, is woven not solely from the threads of personal history and societal influence, but also from the deeper, often unarticulated longings of the spirit. The unresolved emotional states and unacknowledged vulnerabilities, which Chapter 2 demonstrated to be the very bedrock of the hidden psychology, frequently manifest as an existential void, a yearning for meaning and connection that transcends the purely material or relational. This chapter, therefore, embarks upon an exploration of the vital yet frequently overlooked dimension, the spiritual underpinnings of the male psyche. We contend that true healing and authentic self-discovery for men necessitate an integration of psychological understanding with profound spiritual wisdom. The stoic facade, the emotional reticence, and the relentless pursuit of external validation or achievement, which often characterize the contemporary man, can be understood not merely as psychological defenses, but also as symptomatic expressions of a deeper spiritual hunger, a longing for transcendence and purpose that remains largely unaddressed in secular discourse. This unacknowledged spiritual yearning constitutes a crucial, often silent component of men's hidden psychology, shaping their choices, their suffering, and their ultimate potential for wholeness. Observe the contemporary man, outwardly strong, resilient, a bulwark against the vicissitudes of the world. Yet beneath this carefully constructed edifice, there often resides a subtle, persistent ache, a sense of meaninglessness, a disconnection from an intrinsic sense of purpose, or an inability to find true peace amidst the relentless demands of modern life. This is not merely a psychological malaise, it is, in our estimation, a spiritual malady, a profound yearning for something beyond the immediate, the tangible, the egoic. Many ancient spiritual traditions, with their millennia of inquiry into the human condition, offer potent frameworks and practices that directly address this inherent longing and provide pathways for the integration of the fragmented male self. We will delve into a selection of these traditions, illustrating how their insights can illuminate and ultimately heal the hidden dimensions of the male psyche. One such tradition, rich in its understanding of the human soul's journey, is Sufism. The mystical dimension of Islam. Sufism posits that the human being is in a constant state of purification, striving to transcend the lower self, or nafs. That nafs represents the ego, the instinctual self driven by desires, fears, and worldly attachments. For men, whose societal conditioning often reinforces a robust, often aggressive ego identity, the Sufi path offers a profound methodology for confronting and transforming this self. The practice of dhikr, the remembrance of God through repetitive chanting of divine names, serves as a powerful tool to quiet the incessant chatter of the mind, to dissolve the ego's grip, and to cultivate an inner awareness of the divine presence. By engaging in such practices, men are invited to move beyond the superficial constructs of strength and control to embrace vulnerability as a gateway to spiritual intimacy, and to channel their inherent masculine energy not into domination but into devotion and self-mastery. The Sufi journey, characterized by stages of purification and spiritual ascent, directly addresses the inner conflict and unresolved emotional states by providing a framework for understanding suffering, not as an affliction, but as a crucible for spiritual growth, leading to a profound sense of inner peace and connection. Similarly, Buddhism, with its emphasis on understanding the nature of suffering, dukkha, and the path to liberation, nirvana, offers invaluable insights into the male psyche. The Buddhist concept of anatta, or non-self, directly challenges the egocentric identity that many men are conditioned to construct and defend. By recognizing the impermanence and interconnectedness of all phenomena, and by cultivating mindfulness and compassion, men can begin to detach from the rigid self-concepts that perpetuate emotional suppression and relational difficulties. The practice of meditation, central to Buddhist traditions, provides a direct means for observing the mind's patterns, including the hidden emotions and unspoken anxieties that comprise the hidden psychology. Through this mindful awareness, men can develop a greater capacity for emotional regulation, moving from reactive responses to contemplative understanding. The path to nirvana is not one of denial, but of profound acceptance and wisdom, guiding men to release the burdens of expectation and attachment, fostering an equanimity that transcends external circumstances and internal turmoil. This framework offers a potent antidote to the existential unease and unacknowledged longing for peace, often buried beneath a veneer of stoicism. From the diverse landscape of Indian spirituality, Hinduism and yoga present a comprehensive paradigm for integrating worldly life with spiritual aspiration. The Purusharthas, the four aims of human life, dharma, righteous conduct, artha, prosperity, kama, pleasure, and moksha, liberation, provide a holistic roadmap for men to navigate their existence. This framework directly addresses the male search for purpose and meaning, validating the pursuit of worldly success and enjoyment while firmly embedding them within a larger ethical and spiritual context. Dharma in particular offers a powerful antidote to the moral ambiguities and societal pressures that can lead men astray, providing a guiding principle for integrity and responsible action. The practice of yoga, encompassing physical postures, asanas, breath control, pranayama, and meditation, serves as a profound means of integrating mind, body, and spirit. It enables men to confront and release stored tension, to cultivate mental clarity, and to access deeper states of consciousness, thereby addressing the neurobiological underpinnings of internal emotional processing by offering a somatic pathway to emotional release and spiritual connection. The ultimate goal of moksha liberation from the cycle of rebirth speaks to the deepest longing for freedom and transcendence, offering a spiritual narrative that can imbue even the most mundane aspects of a man's life with sacred purpose. Finally, within the Western tradition, Christian mysticism and contemplative Christianity offer a profound path for men seeking deeper spiritual connection. Concepts such as the dark night of the soul, articulated by mystics like St. John of the Cross, provide a powerful framework for understanding periods of spiritual desolation and existential crisis. Far from being signs of weakness, these periods are seen as necessary stages of purification, stripping away attachments and egoic constructs to prepare the soul for deeper union with the divine. For men who are often conditioned to suppress suffering and present an image of unwavering strength, this tradition offers validation for their inner struggles, reframing them as sacred journeys rather than personal failures. Contemplative prayer, such as centering prayer or the Jesus prayer, functions similarly to dhikr or Buddhist meditation, quieting the mind and opening the heart to a direct experience of the divine presence. This practice fosters humility, surrender, and a profound sense of trust, counteracting the dismissive avoidant tendencies by cultivating an intimate relationship with the sacred. It encourages men to embrace vulnerability as a strength, to seek solace not in control, but in divine love, and to find their true identity not in worldly achievements, but in their spiritual essence. These diverse spiritual traditions, while distinct in their theological and methodological approaches, converge on a common understanding of the human being as fundamentally spiritual, yearning for connection, meaning, and transcendence. By engaging with these insights, we can connect them directly back to the hidden psychology of men, offering transformative pathways for the challenges previously identified. Emotional integration. Rather than suppressing emotions, these traditions provide frameworks for understanding suffering as a catalyst for growth, offering tools like mindfulness, prayer, and self-inquiry to process and transcend emotional turmoil. Meaning and purpose. They address the existential void that often underlies male stoicism and relentless external striving, offering a grander narrative of human existence and a framework for aligning one's life with ethical and spiritual principles. Dharma. Purusharthas. Authentic connection. By emphasizing interconnectedness, compassion, and the cultivation of an inner spiritual life, these traditions foster a deeper, more authentic connection to self, others, and the divine, thereby counteracting the isolating effects of dismissive avoidant attachment and rigid masculine scripts. Transformation of the shadow. Spiritual practices inherently involve confronting one's lower self, nafs, egoic attachments, and disowned aspects of personality, integrating them into a more whole and conscious self, thereby transforming the Jungian shadow archetype. Reclaiming the sacred masculine. These traditions offer archetypes and paths for embodying a balanced, integrated masculinity, one characterized by wisdom, compassion, integrity, and spiritual devotion, moving beyond narrow, often toxic, societal stereotypes. In essence, the integration of psychological understanding with spiritual wisdom offers a more comprehensive and potent path toward healing and self-actualization for men. The hidden psychology, previously understood as a repository of unexpressed emotions and unacknowledged longings, is now revealed to also contain a profound spiritual yearning, By acknowledging and addressing this yearning through the rich insights and practices of global spiritual traditions, we equip men not only to understand their inner landscape, but also to cultivate a deeper sense of purpose, to forge authentic connections, and to ultimately embody a holistic and integrated self, aligned with both their psychological depths and their spiritual heights. The ensuing chapters will unpack how this synthesis can be practically applied, guiding men toward a profound and lasting transformation. Having meticulously explored the intricate psychological frameworks that shape the contemporary man's inner world in Chapter 2, unveiling the pervasive influence of attachment patterns, social learning, neurobiological predispositions, and the profound archetypal dynamics of the shadow, and subsequently in Chapter 3, having illuminated the equally potent spiritual dimensions of his hidden psychology, demonstrating how ancient wisdom traditions offer profound pathways to meaning, healing, and transcendence, we now stand at a pivotal juncture. Our preceding analyses have, with deliberate intent, laid a comprehensive theoretical foundation, meticulously mapping the terrain of both the psychological wounds and the spiritual yearnings that define the male experience. Yet, understanding, however profound, remains incomplete without the articulation of actionable pathways. It is insufficient merely to diagnose the hidden complexities. Our purpose now shifts toward the crucial task of offering a blueprint for their integration. Thus, this chapter embarks upon a systematic delineation of the foundational principles and initial, indispensable steps for achieving a holistic integration of the psychological and spiritual dimensions within the male psyche. We contend that true healing and authentic self-realization for men necessitate a conscious, deliberate synthesis of these two seemingly disparate realms, transcending the reductionist tendencies of purely material or purely spiritual approaches. This integration is not a mere amalgamation of techniques, but a profound reorientation of being, a journey from fragmentation to wholeness, from the performative facade to an embodied truth. It represents the conscious effort to align the ego with the self, the conscious with the unconscious, and the immanent with the transcendent, thereby fostering a robust and resilient sense of identity that is both psychologically sound and spiritually resonant. The ultimate aim is to cultivate a form of masculinity that is neither fragile nor rigid, but rather fluid, empathetic, purposeful, and deeply connected to both the human and the divine. The inaugural and arguably most formidable prerequisite for this integrative journey is the cultivation of a radical self-awareness. Before any meaningful transformation can occur, the individual must first become acutely cognizant of the internal landscape that has hitherto remained largely obscured or deliberately repressed. This necessitates a courageous introspection, a willingness to turn the gaze inward and confront the often uncomfortable truths residing within. It involves recognizing the specific manifestations of the psychological patterns we have previously discussed, identifying one's own attachment style, discerning the insidious ways in which societal conditioning and rigid gender roles have shaped emotional responses and relational dynamics, and acknowledging the subtle yet persistent neurobiological predispositions that influence mood and behavior. For many men, this initial stage is catalyzed by a profound sense of existential dissatisfaction, a gnawing emptiness despite outward success, or the recurring patterns of relational struggle that compel a re-evaluation of their internal operating system. This is often the dark night of the soul in a psychological sense, a period of disquietude that serves as a necessary crucible for growth, forcing the individual to look beyond superficial remedies and into the unseen depths of his own being. Crucially, self-awareness in this integrated context extends beyond mere psychological recognition. It demands an acknowledgement of the soul's spiritual hunger that Chapter 3 so thoroughly explored. The contemporary man must learn to differentiate between fleeting desires and the deeper, more enduring yearnings for meaning, connection, and transcendence. This involves sensing the subtle reverberations of the divine within the mundane, recognizing the call to something greater than the egoic self, and allowing for the possibility that the very restlessness he experiences might be a spiritual yearning, masquerading as a psychological deficit. This profound shift in perspective, from viewing internal discomfort solely through a pathological lens, to understanding it as potentially indicative of an unfulfilled spiritual quest, is a cornerstone of the integrative process. It invites a broader, more compassionate understanding of the self, one that embraces both the wounded human and the aspiring spirit. Following the bedrock of self-awareness, the next imperative step in this integrative process is the arduous but essential task of reclaiming emotional literacy. For generations, men have been implicitly and often explicitly conditioned to suppress, deny, or intellectualize their emotional experiences. The prevailing cultural narrative has often equated emotional expression with weakness, thereby fostering a profound illiteracy in the language of the heart. The consequence is a vast internal reservoir of unacknowledged and unprocessed emotions, grief, fear, anger, joy, tenderness, that like subterranean currents exert unseen influence over behavior, relationships, and overall well-being. To reclaim emotional literacy is to embark upon a deliberate practice of identifying, naming, and experiencing these emotions without judgment or immediate impulse to control them. This involves cultivating a mindful presence, allowing emotions to arise, observing their phenomenology, and understanding their messages. It is a process of re-educating the nervous system, learning to tolerate discomfort, and gradually expanding one's emotional vocabulary. This re-engagement with the emotional self is profoundly liberating, dismantling the stoic facade brick by painful brick and revealing the rich, vibrant inner world that lies beneath. It is a testament to immense courage, for to feel fully is to risk the vulnerability that society has long taught men to fear. This brings us directly to the third foundational principle, the courageous embrace of vulnerability. In a culture that frequently valorizes stoicism, self-reliance, and an impervious exterior, vulnerability is often misconstrued as a deficit, an invitation for exploitation or shame. However, from an integrated perspective, vulnerability is not merely a strength, but an indispensable gateway to authentic connection, profound self-discovery, and the very essence of human experience. It is the willingness to be seen, truly seen, in one's imperfection, one's fear, one's longing. For men, the act of disclosing an inner struggle, admitting doubt, or expressing tenderness can be revolutionary, challenging decades of internalized conditioning. This embrace of vulnerability is crucial for dismantling the dismissive, avoidant attachment patterns that often isolate men, creating the very relational longing they are ill-equipped to satisfy. It fosters genuine intimacy, both with oneself and with others, by creating space for empathy, understanding, and mutual support. It is through vulnerability that the heart opens, allowing for the flow of compassion and connection that is vital for psychological health and spiritual growth. The journey of embracing vulnerability is incremental, often beginning with small, safe disclosures, gradually building the capacity to lean into discomfort and trust the inherent goodness of authentic connection. The fourth foundational pillar supporting this integrative architecture is the cultivation of introspection and contemplation. These are not merely passive activities, but active, disciplined practices that serve as conduits for deeper self-understanding and spiritual communion. Psychologically, introspection involves systematic self-observation, reflection on thoughts, feelings, and behavioral patterns, often aided by journaling, therapeutic dialogue, or reflective meditation. It allows the individual to trace the origins of their responses, to identify the roots of their conditioning, and to bring unconscious dynamics into conscious awareness. Spiritually, contemplation transcends mere analysis, inviting a receptive openness to the transcendent. Whether through focused meditation, dhyana, silent prayer, daikh, remembrance of God, or the reflective study of sacred texts, contemplative practices quiet the incessant chatter of the ego, creating a fertile ground for intuition, insight, and a direct experience of the divine. These practices are synergistic. Psychological introspection can reveal the egoic attachments that hinder spiritual ascent, while spiritual contemplation can provide the broader perspective and inner peace necessary to navigate psychological complexities with greater equanimity. Together, they form a powerful crucible for transforming the fragmented self into an integrated whole, allowing the individual to engage with both their inner wounds and their highest aspirations. Ultimately, these foundational principles, radical self-awareness, emotional reliteracy, the embrace of vulnerability, and the cultivation of introspection and contemplation, represent the initial courageous steps in moving beyond the impenetrable facade. The stoic, self-sufficient exterior, while offering a semblance of control and protection, ultimately exacts a heavy toll. It fosters isolation, stifles authentic expression, and perpetuates a profound sense of existential loneliness. The integrative journey, therefore, is an unwavering commitment to truth over performance, to authenticity over societal expectation. It is an internal revolution, a dismantling of the persona that has served as both shield and prison. This journey inward is not without its challenges. It demands sustained effort, resilience in the face of discomfort, and a willingness to confront long-held beliefs about masculinity. Yet the rewards are immeasurable: a profound sense of inner peace, genuine connection, and the liberating experience of inhabiting one's true self. As we conclude this exploration of foundational principles, it is imperative to underscore that these are not discrete, sequential steps, but rather interwoven strands of a continuous process. They lay the groundwork, preparing the soil for the deeper, more specific methodologies that will be explored in subsequent chapters. These initial shifts in perspective and internal practices are the indispensable precursors to engaging effectively with the practical integration strategies derived from both contemporary psychology and perennial spiritual traditions. They equip the contemporary man with the inner resources and the mindset required to embark upon a truly transformative path, one that promises not just relief from suffering, but the profound blossoming of an authentic, integrated self, capable of embodying the full spectrum of human and spiritual potential. The ensuing chapters will delve into the specific techniques and practices that facilitate this integration, building upon the awareness, emotional capacity, and contemplative openness cultivated in this initial stage. Having established the foundational principles for genuine psychological and spiritual integration in the preceding chapter, namely radical self-awareness, reclaiming emotional literacy, courageous embrace of vulnerability, and the cultivation of introspection and contemplation, we now turn our attention to the practical methodologies through which these theoretical frameworks can be embodied and actualized. The transition from intellectual assent to lived experience represents the crucial pivot point in the journey toward the integrated self, requiring deliberate, sustained engagement with practices designed to dismantle the accumulated layers of the impenetrable facade and cultivate authentic being. Our purpose in this chapter is to delineate specific, actionable strategies that synthesize the insights gleaned from psychological inquiry with the wisdom offered by diverse spiritual traditions, thereby providing a comprehensive roadmap for men seeking to navigate their hidden psychology and reclaim their inherent wholeness. The strategies we propose are not merely prescriptive exercises, but rather profound invitations to engage with the self at its deepest levels, fostering a dynamic interplay between conscious intention and unconscious processes. They are designed to address the very core of the contemporary man's hidden struggles, the emotional suppression born of social conditioning, the relational difficulties stemming from dismissive avoidant attachment, the existential yearning for meaning, and the fragmentation of the sacred masculine. Cultivating embodied presence and emotional attunement. One of the most immediate and impactful pathways to radical self-awareness and emotional literacy involves the cultivation of embodied presence. The contemporary man, often dissociated from his internal landscape by a lifetime of emotional suppression, frequently inhabits a purely cognitive realm, treating his body merely as a vessel for action, rather than a repository of wisdom and emotion. Psychological research consistently demonstrates that emotional experiences are profoundly somatic. Suppressed emotions do not simply vanish, but manifest as chronic tension, unexplained discomfort, or even illness, further cementing the barrier between conscious awareness and the body's subtle signals. Mindfulness and body-based practices. We advocate for the systematic integration of mindfulness into daily life, extending beyond formal meditation to encompass a continuous, non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. Practices such as focused attention meditation, where the breath serves as an anchor for awareness, directly cultivate the capacity to observe internal states, thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations without immediate identification or reaction. This is a direct counter to the default mode of emotional deactivation and avoidance. The Buddhist practice of vipassana, or insight meditation, offers a profound methodology for observing the impermanent nature of all phenomena, including the ebb and flow of emotions, thereby fostering equanimity and reducing the grip of reactive patterns. Furthermore, body scan meditations specifically guide attention through various parts of the body, inviting men to notice sensations, tension, warmth, tingling, emptiness, and to stay present with them, even if uncomfortable. This practice directly challenges the tendency to intellectualize or externalize emotional experience, instead rooting it in the immediate felt reality of the body. For men accustomed to suppressing vulnerability, engaging with physical discomfort through conscious awareness can be a potent initiation into emotional reclamation. It offers a safe container to experience the physiological correlates of anxiety, anger, or sadness, rather than immediately pushing them away. Movement-based practices, such as yoga, tai chi, or qigong, further deepen embodied awareness. These ancient disciplines, originating from Hindu and Taoist spiritual traditions, are not merely physical exercises. They are systems of integrated movement, breath, and mindfulness designed to harmonize mind and body. Through deliberate postures and flowing movements, men can learn to identify and release stored tension, improve interoceptive awareness, the perception of internal bodily states, and cultivate a sense of inner stillness amidst physical exertion. The neurobiological underpinnings of these practices, Their capacity to regulate the autonomic nervous system, reduce cortisol levels, and enhance vagal tone underscore their efficacy in fostering emotional resilience and mitigating the physiological impact of chronic stress and emotional suppression. By consciously inhabiting their bodies, men begin to dismantle the mental-emotional divide, transforming their physical form from an unconscious container of repressed experience into a conscious pathway for emotional integration and self-discovery, articulating the inner landscape, narrative, and expression. While embodied practices cultivate direct experience, the act of articulating one's inner world is equally vital for integrating the hidden psychology, the unspoken, unexamined aspects of the self, the shadow, the unacknowledged wounds, the nascent spiritual yearnings, often remain potent forces precisely because they lack conscious expression. Journaling and reflective writing. The practice of journaling serves as an accessible yet profoundly transformative tool for radical self-awareness and emotional literacy. It provides a private, non-judgmental space for men to externalize their thoughts, feelings, fears, and aspirations. Unlike casual thought, the act of committing internal experiences to paper forces a degree of organization and articulation, making the nebulous concrete. We encourage various approaches. Stream of consciousness writing allows the unfiltered flow of thoughts, bringing unconscious material to the surface. Emotional tracking involves noting specific emotions experienced throughout the day, their triggers, and their bodily sensations, thereby enhancing emotional vocabulary and insight. Reflective prompts can guide inquiry into specific areas, such as exploring past experiences through the lens of attachment theory, examining societal expectations that have shaped one's masculinity, or articulating moments of spiritual longing. Dream journaling, inspired by Jungian psychology, offers a direct portal to the unconscious, allowing men to record and reflect upon symbolic narratives that illuminate their archetypal dynamics and the contents of their shadow. Through consistent journaling, men can begin to identify recurring patterns, challenge limiting beliefs derived from social learning, and reauthor their personal narratives, moving from passive recipients of conditioning to active creators of meaning. This process, akin to a personal dark night of the soul in its honest confrontation with inner turmoil, fosters a profound sense of self-understanding and empowers the individual to integrate previously disowned aspects of their psyche. Creative and expressive arts. Beyond the written word, engaging with various forms of creative expression can unlock deeper layers of emotional and archetypal understanding. For men unaccustomed to verbalizing their inner lives, non-verbal modalities can be particularly liberating. Visual arts, drawing, painting, sculpting, provide a means to externalize emotions, conflicts, or visions that resist verbal articulation. The abstract nature of art allows for symbolic representation, bypassing intellectual censorship and directly engaging with the unconscious. Music and sound can be utilized both receptively, listening to evoke specific moods or memories, and actively, creating music, drumming or chanting. The Sufi tradition, for instance, employs dhikr, remembrance of God through rhythmic chanting or prayer, not only as a spiritual discipline but also as a powerful method for purifying the nafs ego and harmonizing the inner being, enabling a profound emotional release and connection to the transcendent. Movement and dance, even in a personal, unchoreographed form, can be a therapeutic release, allowing the body to express emotions that have been rigidly held. These expressive practices, by giving form to the formless, facilitate the integration of the shadow, allowing men to confront and assimilate aspects of themselves, vulnerability, anger, sorrow, joy, that have been deemed unacceptable by internal or external critics. They serve as conduits for bringing the fragmented sacred masculine into conscious awareness, allowing for its reassembly and healthy expression, bridging the divide, authentic relational engagement. The courageous embrace of vulnerability, a cornerstone principle, finds its most profound application within the crucible of authentic relationships. For the contemporary man, often conditioned into a dismissive avoidant attachment style, the prospect of genuine emotional intimacy can be daunting. Yet, it is precisely within the context of safe, trusting relationships that the deepest healing and growth occur. Conscious communication practices. We advocate for the deliberate cultivation of communication skills that prioritize honesty, empathy, and vulnerability. This involves moving beyond superficial interactions to engage in dialogues that reveal one's true inner state. I statements are fundamental, shifting focus from blame or accusation to personal experience, e.g., I feel sad when, instead of you make me sad. This practice helps men take ownership of their emotional landscape and communicate it clearly, a crucial step in emotional literacy. Active and empathetic listening involves truly hearing another person without immediately formulating a response, seeking to understand their perspective and reflecting back what has been heard. This builds trust and creates a reciprocal space for vulnerability. Practicing emotional disclosure. With trusted individuals, a partner, a close friend, a therapist, or a spiritual mentor is paramount. This is where the theoretical understanding of vulnerability translates into lived experience. Starting with smaller, manageable disclosures and gradually expanding the scope of shared emotional experience can build confidence and reinforce the positive outcomes of authentic connection, directly countering the fear of rejection or inadequacy that often fuels emotional suppression. These relational practices directly challenge the rigid gender role socialization that dictates men must be impervious and self-sufficient. They create opportunities to dismantle the stoic facade and experience the profound relief and connection that arises from being truly seen and accepted, flaws and all. The spiritual traditions, in their emphasis on compassion, karuna in Buddhism, unconditional love, agape, in Christianity, and the interconnectedness of all beings, Brahman in Hinduism, Wahdat al-Wujud in Sufism, provide a powerful ethical and metaphysical framework for fostering these deep relational bonds. They remind us that true strength lies not in isolation, but in the courage to connect authentically and to serve others from a place of genuine presence and empathy. Anchoring the sacred, ritual and archetypal engagement, the unacknowledged spiritual hunger, often manifesting as an existential unease or a pervasive sense of meaninglessness, requires specific practices that connect the individual to something larger than the egoic self. The cultivation of introspection and contemplation, while a principle, finds its concrete expression in ritual and archetypal engagement. Personalized sacred practices. The integration of spiritual practices need not adhere to a rigid dogmatic framework, but can be deeply personalized, drawing from the rich tapestry of traditions discussed previously. Daily contemplative practice. This might involve a formalized meditation, a samatha meditation from Buddhism to calm the mind, contemplative prayer, e.g., centering prayer from Christian mysticism to foster surrender and openness to the divine, or japa, mantra repetition from Hinduism to focus the mind and evoke spiritual qualities. The key is consistency and intentionality, creating a regular space for inner quiet and connection to the transcendent. Creating a sacred space or altar. Dedicating a physical space, however small, for reflection, prayer, or meditation can profoundly impact one's commitment to spiritual practice. This externalizes the internal intention, signaling to the self the importance of this dimension. Engaging with sacred texts or wisdom traditions, reading and reflecting upon scriptures, philosophical treatises, or mystical poetry can provide guidance, inspiration, and a sense of connection to a lineage of seekers. This intellectual and spiritual engagement nourishes the yearning for meaning and wisdom. Archetypal engagement and mythic exploration. Drawing from Jungian psychology, direct engagement with archetypal imagery and personal mythologies can be a powerful means of integrating the shadow and reclaiming the sacred masculine. Active imagination. This technique involves consciously entering into a dialogue with unconscious figures or symbols that emerge from dreams, meditations, or creative expression. For example, a man might actively engage with an image of a wounded warrior or a wise old king, asking questions and receiving insights, thereby bringing unconscious archetypal energies into conscious awareness for integration and transformation. Exploring personal myths. Understanding the stories and narratives that unconsciously shape one's life, how one perceives masculinity, success, failure, love, can reveal deeply ingrained archetypal patterns. By consciously examining and reinterpreting these myths, men can liberate themselves from restrictive narratives and embrace new, more empowering archetypal expressions. This process is deeply healing, allowing for the conscious assimilation of fragmented aspects of the self and the re-establishment of a coherent, purposeful identity. These integrated practices, far from being mere intellectual exercises, represent a profound commitment to holistic self-discovery. They are the conduits through which the principles of radical self-awareness, emotional literacy, courageous vulnerability, and profound introspection are transformed from abstract ideals into lived realities. By diligently engaging with embodied presence, articulating their inner landscapes, fostering authentic relational bonds, and anchoring their lives in sacred practice, men can courageously navigate the complex terrain of their hidden psychology. This journey, while demanding, promises not merely the alleviation of suffering, but the profound reclamation of an integrated, authentic, and purposeful self, capable of both deep feeling and meaningful contribution to the world. The ensuing chapters will further unpack the societal and systemic implications of this transformation, exploring how the individual journey towards wholeness can ripple outwards, fostering a more compassionate and conscious collective masculinity. Having meticulously outlined the foundational principles and practical strategies for the individual man to navigate his hidden psychology, we now turn our gaze outward toward the broader landscape of human interaction and societal structure. The preceding chapters have focused intensely on the internal alchemical process, the arduous yet profoundly rewarding journey of introspection, emotional reclamation, and spiritual integration that liberates the contemporary man from the confines of his self-imposed, socially reinforced stoicism. This deep dive into the inner world, though seemingly solitary, is never an isolated endeavor. Its transformative power is never solely confined to the individual psyche. It inevitably spills over, like a wellspring overflowing its banks, catalyzing profound shifts in relational dynamics, communal well-being, and the very fabric of our collective understanding of masculinity. Our purpose in this concluding chapter is to explore the far-reaching societal implications of this metamorphosis, charting the potential trajectory for a more integrated, authentic, and purposeful male presence in the world, one man at a time. Observe the contemporary man who, having embarked upon the path we have delineated, begins to consciously dismantle the dismissive avoidant attachment patterns that have long dictated his relational modus operandi. He recalls the years he spent in an emotional fortress, where feelings were threats and vulnerability a chink in his armour. That former reticence, the guardedness that once served as a psychological barrier, gradually yields to an emergent capacity for genuine emotional reciprocity. In intimate partnerships, this translates into a deeper, more resonant connection, where vulnerability is no longer perceived as a perilous weakness, but rather as a courageous gateway to authentic intimacy. He learns to articulate his internal landscape not merely as a catalogue of thoughts, a dry list of facts, but as a vibrant tapestry of feelings, needs, and aspirations. I'm feeling a sense of unease tonight, not anger, but a quiet anxiety about the week ahead, he might tell his partner rather than just retreating into silence. This fosters an environment of mutual understanding and secure attachment where both individuals feel seen and heard. This newfound emotional literacy allows him to engage with his partner's inner world with greater empathy, moving beyond the superficiality that often characterizes relationships predicated on unspoken expectations and unacknowledged resentments. He listens with an active presence, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly absorbing the nuances of her joy, her frustration, her quiet longing. He understands, perhaps for the first time, that true connection is built on shared emotional space, not just shared activities. The ripple effect extends to familial bonds, where the integrated man, having confronted his own psychological inheritance, becomes a conscious agent in breaking intergenerational cycles of emotional suppression. He remembers his own father's stoicism, the unspoken rules that decreed men don't cry, don't complain, don't show fear. I will not pass that burden on, he thinks, a quiet resolve hardening within him. He models a different paradigm for his children, demonstrating that strength resides not in imperviousness but in the capacity for self-awareness, compassion, and the courage to feel deeply. He might sit with his son validating his tears over a scraped knee, or a perceived injustice saying, "It's okay to feel sad, son. It shows you care." His friendships, too, transcend the realm of shared activities or performative bravado, evolving into spaces of mutual support, genuine listening, and the honest sharing of life's profound challenges and triumphs. The superficial banter about sports or work still exists, but now it's punctuated by the moments of real vulnerability, where one friend might admit, "I'm really struggling with this career decision," and the integrated man responds not with quick advice, but with, "Tell me more. I'm here to listen." Beyond the immediate sphere of personal relationships, the individual transformation of men begins to coalesce into a powerful force for redefining the collective understanding of masculinity itself. For generations, societal scripts have narrowly prescribed male identity, often equating it with an unyielding strength, an unwavering rationality, and a stoic detachment from the messiness of emotion. This archaic paradigm, while perhaps offering a semblance of order and control, has simultaneously fostered emotional illiteracy, relational alienation, and a profound spiritual hunger disguised as relentless external striving for power, wealth, or status. The integrated man, however, embodies a different archetype, one that reclaims the essence of the sacred masculine not as a dominant hierarchical force seeking to control, but as a source of conscious leadership, empathetic wisdom, and generative strength rooted in self-awareness and spiritual grounding. He understands that true power emanates from within, a quiet confidence forged in the fires of self-discovery. He demonstrates that true strength lies not in suppressing doubt, but in the capacity for introspection, the courage to embrace one's shadow, those uncomfortable, disowned parts of himself, and the unwavering commitment to ethical action born of a holistic understanding of self and other. He becomes a living testament to the idea that a man can be both fierce and tender, decisive and contemplative, a protector and a nurturer. This shift has profound implications for our communities and public spheres, injecting a much-needed depth and humanity into traditionally rigid structures. In workplaces, an integrated man contributes not only his intellect and strategic acumen, but also his emotional intelligence, fostering environments of psychological safety, collaborative innovation, and compassionate leadership. He's the manager who, instead of simply dictating, asks, "How are we all feeling about this deadline? What support do we need to get there?" He is less prone to the unchecked egoic drives that can lead to toxic competitive dynamics, where colleagues are seen as rivals to be overcome, and more inclined to foster mentorship, support, and collective flourishing. He understands that a rising tide lifts all boats, and his success is intertwined with the success of his team. In civic engagement, he brings a nuanced perspective capable of engaging with complex social issues not merely through the lens of logic or power, but with an underlying current of empathy and a profound sense of shared humanity. When discussing policy, he might ask, how will this impact the most vulnerable among us, rather than solely focusing on economic metrics? The public discourse, often polarized and aggressive, benefits immensely from the presence of men who can articulate their positions with clarity while remaining open to differing perspectives, grounded in their own internal equilibrium rather than reactive defensiveness. The very notion of what constitutes a strong man begins to evolve, expanding to include qualities such as emotional resilience, ethical integrity, spiritual depth, and the capacity for genuine connection, moving far beyond the outdated image of the silent, unfeeling provider. Yet, we must acknowledge that this profound societal shift is not without its challenges. The inertia of deeply ingrained cultural norms, coupled with the inherent human discomfort with change, present significant hurdles. The contemporary man who embarks on this journey of integration may encounter resistance, not only from external societal expectations, but also from within himself, as the ego resists the relinquishing of its familiar, albeit restrictive, patterns. He might find himself questioning, am I still strong if I admit I'm struggling? Will others see me as weak? Society, accustomed to the predictable contours of traditional masculinity, may initially view vulnerability as weakness, emotional expression as effeminate, and spiritual inquiry as an esoteric indulgence, dismissing it with a skeptical glance or a dismissive comment like, "Why can't he just suck it up?" This resistance underscores the imperative for collective dialogue, for educational initiatives that demystify the psychological and spiritual dimensions of human experience, making them accessible and relevant to everyday life. It calls for the media portrayals that offer more expansive and nuanced representations of male identity, showcasing heroes who are both brave and tender, intelligent and emotionally wise, creating spaces, both physical and conceptual, where men can safely explore their inner worlds, engage in authentic dialogue, and receive support for their transformative journeys becomes paramount. These might be men's groups focused on emotional literacy, workshops on conscious parenting, or simply online communities where open, honest sharing is encouraged and celebrated. This necessitates a broader societal commitment to fostering psychological literacy and spiritual openness, moving beyond the confines of a purely materialistic or reductionist worldview that often leaves the soul unaddressed and unnourished. The collective flourishing we envision is one where men are not merely productive members of society, cogs in an economic machine, but fully human beings, unburdened by the weight of unexpressed emotion and unacknowledged longing. It is a society where the inherent strengths traditionally associated with masculinity, courage, resilience, protection, provision, are harmonized with the equally vital qualities of empathy, compassion, intuition, and spiritual wisdom. Imagine a leader who can make tough decisions with unwavering resolve, yet also listen deeply to the concerns of his team, acknowledging their fears and offering genuine support. This integration promises a future where men can contribute their unique gifts to the world without sacrificing their inner truth, where they can lead with both strength and heart, and where they can forge relationships characterized by profound authenticity and secure attachment, creating a web of genuine human connection. The journey of the individual man, therefore, becomes a microcosm of a larger societal evolution, an essential step toward healing not only the individual psyche, but also the collective soul of humanity. Our exploration of the hidden psychology of men, integrating the insights of cutting-edge psychological research with the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions, ultimately serves as a call to action, profound invitation to both men and society at large. It is an invitation to look beyond the surface, to delve into the unseen depths, and to embark upon the courageous path of self-discovery and integration. The potential rewards are immeasurable. For the individual, a life of greater authenticity, purpose, and inner peace, a genuine sense of being whole. For relationships, a foundation of deeper connection and mutual understanding, free from the burdens of unsaid words. And for society, the emergence of a more compassionate, resilient, and holistically flourishing collective where every voice is valued and every heart can be heard. The work is ongoing, the path arduous, requiring sustained effort and courageous vulnerability, but the vision of a world populated by truly integrated, fully human men who embody both strength and vulnerability, intellect and intuition, worldly engagement and spiritual depth, is a vision worthy of our most dedicated and profound pursuit. It is, in essence, the promise of a more whole and harmonious human future, a legacy we are all called to build. The profound shifts in individual consciousness and collective dynamics, as elucidated in the preceding chapters, do not culminate in a static state of perfected being, nor do they represent a definitive endpoint in the evolutionary trajectory of masculinity. Rather, the integration of the hidden psychology and spiritual yearnings of men, while yielding transformative outcomes, inaugurates a continuous process, an ongoing journey characterized by refinement, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to authentic self-expression and spiritual attunement. This chapter, therefore, embarks upon an exploration of the enduring nature of this integration, delineating the mechanisms for its sustenance, the inevitability of its challenges, and the expansive vision for a future where integrated masculinity serves as a cornerstone of holistic human flourishing. We contend that the transformative work, once initiated, demands perpetual vigilance and a conscious dedication to the practices and principles previously outlined. The integrated man is not a fixed archetype achieved and then passively maintained. Instead, he is a dynamic embodiment of ongoing self-actualization, continually navigating the subtle interplay between his inner landscape and the external world. The initial breakthroughs, the reclamation of emotional literacy, the courageous embrace of vulnerability, the anchoring of the sacred are but foundational steps. To sustain this momentum, men must cultivate a rigorous spiritual hygiene and psychological maintenance, akin to the disciplined practices required for any profound mastery. This involves a consistent return to introspection, a deliberate engagement with contemplative practices, and a willingness to confront the ever-evolving manifestations of the ego, nafs, and the unintegrated shadow. The journey, far from being a linear ascent, is often cyclical, necessitating a repeated engagement with the selfsame principles, albeit at deeper, more nuanced levels of understanding and application. The cultivation of a supportive community becomes paramount in this sustained integration. While the initial work often begins in solitude, the authentic expression of an integrated self thrives within relational contexts that mirror and reinforce its values. Men require spaces, whether formal groups, trusted friendships, or enlightened partnerships, where vulnerability is not merely tolerated but celebrated, where emotional expression is met with empathy rather than judgment, and where spiritual inquiry is encouraged without dogma. These communal anchors serve as vital counterweights to the persistent societal pressures that might tempt a return to the familiar, albeit restrictive, patterns of stoicism and emotional reticence. Through shared narratives, mutual accountability, and the witnessing of one another's struggles and triumphs, men can reinforce their commitment to this deeper path, finding collective strength in their individual transformations. This intergenerational dialogue, in particular, offers a powerful conduit for the transmission of integrated wisdom, enabling older men to mentor younger generations in the nuances of this complex journey, thereby building a legacy of conscious masculinity. Yet, to posit a journey of perpetual growth without acknowledging its inherent obstacles would be to offer an incomplete and ultimately disingenuous account. The path towards sustained integration is not devoid of regressions, moments where old patterns reassert their insidious influence, particularly under duress or in the face of significant life transitions. Observe the contemporary man, even one who has made considerable strides in self-awareness. A sudden crisis, a profound loss, or an unexpected failure can trigger a resurgence of dismissive avoidant tendencies, a retreat into emotional suppression, or a renewed reliance on external validation over internal truth. These recessions are not failures of the integration itself, but rather intrinsic components of the human condition, offering crucial opportunities for deeper learning and resilience. Modern psychology informs us that neurobiological pathways, once deeply etched, retain a latent potency capable of reactivation. The work, therefore, is not to eradicate these old pathways, but to consistently choose and reinforce new ones, developing a robust capacity for self-compassion and a sophisticated awareness of one's triggers. When old patterns resurface, the integrated man is called to respond not with self-condemnation, but with a profound sense of curiosity and self-kindness, viewing these moments as data points rather than moral failings. This involves a conscious re-engagement with the practices of emotional attunement and radical self-awareness, pausing to identify the underlying emotion, acknowledging the impulse to retreat or suppress, and deliberately choosing a more conscious response. Here, the spiritual frameworks become invaluable. Buddhist principles of non-attachment and mindfulness allow for the observation of these regressions without becoming identified with them, fostering a detached yet compassionate awareness. Christian mysticism's emphasis on humility and surrender can help men navigate moments of egoic contraction, recognizing them as calls to deeper spiritual reliance rather than personal weakness. Sufi practices, through their continuous purification of the nafs, provide a framework for understanding the persistent allure of lower self-expressions and the need for unwavering devotion to higher ideals. The hero's journey, we recall, is not a singular expedition, but a cyclical return, each cycle deepening the hero's wisdom and capacity for integration. As individual men commit to this ongoing process, the collective landscape of masculinity continues its gradual, yet inexorable evolution. The societal implications, which we touched upon in Chapter 6, extend into a future where the very narratives defining male identity are fundamentally reshaped. Entrenched patriarchal structures, predicated on notions of dominance, emotional impermeability, and hierarchical power, begin to crumble under the weight of an increasing number of men embodying a more conscious, empathetic, and integrative paradigm. We envision a future where educational systems proactively cultivate emotional literacy in boys from early childhood, where media portrays diverse and nuanced expressions of masculinity, and where intergenerational dialogue actively dismantles harmful stereotypes, replacing them with models of generative strength, relational wisdom, and spiritual depth. This shift moves beyond merely less toxic masculinity to a proactive embrace of conscious partnership across all spheres of human interaction. In intimate relationships, this translates into profound emotional reciprocity and shared vulnerability. In familial bonds, it fosters environments of psychological safety and authentic connection. Within workplaces, it cultivates compassionate leadership, ethical decision-making, and a culture of collaborative innovation. In civic engagement, it manifests as a nuanced understanding of social justice, a commitment to environmental stewardship, and a pursuit of collective well-being rooted in empathy and interconnectedness. This evolving landscape is not merely a rejection of the old, but an active construction of the new, a masculinity that is both robust and tender, powerful and humble, fiercely protective and deeply compassionate. It is a masculinity that understands its strength not in isolation, but in its capacity for connection and its alignment with universal spiritual principles. The horizon of holistic flourishing, then, is the ultimate vision towards which this sustained integration propels us. Imagine a society where a significant proportion of men are not merely psychologically healthy, but also spiritually attuned. Men who are deeply connected to their inner lives, authentically engaged in their relationships, and consciously contributing to the betterment of the world. Such men would approach global challenges, from climate change to social inequality, from geopolitical conflict to economic disparity, not from a place of egoic power or defensive posturing, but from a profound understanding of interconnectedness and a compassionate desire for universal well-being. They would be stewards of the self, of others, and of the planet, embodying a wisdom that transcends mere intellectual acumen, rooted instead in the harmonious integration of mind, body, and spirit. This vision is not utopian fantasy, but a tangible potential, incrementally realized through the courageous and persistent efforts of individual men. It requires an unwavering commitment to the inner journey, a willingness to confront and integrate the shadow, and a continuous dedication to the practices that foster self-awareness, emotional literacy, vulnerability, and spiritual connection. The ongoing work of integrating the hidden psychology of men is, at its core, an evolutionary imperative, a call to awaken the full spectrum of human potential within the masculine. thereby elevating not only individual lives but the very fabric of human civilization. It is a dynamic living process, demanding vigilance, courage, and an unceasing devotion to authenticity and the profound unifying truths of the human spirit. Having traversed the intricate landscapes of individual psychological integration and spiritual awakening, and having articulated the necessity of perpetual vigilance in this arduous yet profoundly rewarding journey, we now turn our gaze outward toward the massive societal canvas upon which these transformations are, and must continue to be, etched. The individual man, having courageously undertaken the task of unifying his fragmented self, reclaiming his emotional literacy, embracing his vulnerability, and anchoring his existence in the sacred, does not merely achieve personal tranquility. Rather, he becomes a potent agent of change, a living testament to a re-envisioned masculinity that reverberates far beyond the confines of his own psyche. Our purpose in this concluding chapter is to illuminate the far-reaching societal ramifications of this integrated masculinity, to project a future where its principles permeate the very fabric of human civilization, and to articulate the collective imperative that underpins this transformative endeavor. The most immediate and discernible impact of an integrated masculinity manifests in the subtle yet profound shift in cultural narratives. For generations, the dominant societal script has prescribed a narrow, often rigid definition of what it means to be a man: stoic, impervious, rational to the exclusion of emotion, and relentlessly driven by external achievement. This archetype, while superficially valorized, has inadvertently fostered a pervasive emotional illiteracy and a deep-seated spiritual malaise within countless men. However, as more men embark upon the path of psychological and spiritual integration, consciously embodying vulnerability as strength, empathy as wisdom, and authentic connection as a core human need, they begin, almost organically, to dismantle these entrenched narratives. They become living counterexamples, demonstrating through their relationships, their work, and their very presence that emotional depth is not a weakness, but a profound source of resilience. That introspection is not self-indulgence, but a prerequisite for genuine leadership, and that spiritual yearning is not an esoteric pursuit, but the very engine of meaning and purpose. This quiet revolution, unfolding in homes, workplaces, and communities, subtly but inexorably recalibrates collective expectations, slowly eroding the foundations of a masculinity built on suppression and isolation, and paving the way for a more expansive, inclusive, and genuinely human paradigm. Furthermore, the integration of men on a larger scale promises to profoundly reshape the dynamics of leadership and governance. In a world grappling with unprecedented complexity, from geopolitical tensions to ecological crises, the traditional models of leadership, often characterized by a hyper-rational, power-centric, and emotionally detached approach, prove increasingly inadequate. An integrated man, having cultivated radical self-awareness, emotional attunement, and an ethical framework rooted in compassion and interconnectedness, brings an entirely different sensibility to positions of authority. He is capable of nuanced decision-making, informed not only by data and logic, but also by empathy for human suffering and a profound understanding of the psychological and spiritual dimensions of collective well-being. His leadership is less about dominance and control, and more about facilitation, collaboration, and the cultivation of an environment where all voices can contribute authentically. We envision a future where policy-making is imbued with a deeper sense of social responsibility, where conflict resolution prioritizes understanding and reconciliation over victory, and where corporate cultures are transformed from competitive battlegrounds into generative ecosystems that value human flourishing as much as profit. This shift in consciousness, originating from the individual's inner work, has the potential to ripple through institutions, fostering a more humane, equitable, and sustainable global society. Crucially, the legacy of integrated masculinity extends across generations, offering a powerful antidote to the intergenerational transmission of psychological wounds and emotional suppression. The cycle of emotionally unavailable fathers raising emotionally stunted sons, or men perpetuating the very patterns of detachment they experienced, can be consciously interrupted. Integrated fathers, mentors, and community leaders become beacons for younger men, demonstrating a path toward emotional fluency, secure attachment, and spiritual grounding from an early age. They model healthy expressions of anger, sadness, and joy. They encourage introspection and self-expression, and they provide safe spaces for vulnerability and authentic connection. Educational systems, too, stand to benefit immensely from this paradigm shift. Curricula can be reimagined to include emotional intelligence, mindfulness practices, and explorations of meaning and purpose, thereby nurturing the holistic development of young men from their formative years. By consciously cultivating these capacities in the next generation, we move beyond merely healing existing wounds. We actively prevent the creation of new ones, laying the groundwork for a future where emotional and spiritual health are not the exception but the norm, fostering a society where men are inherently equipped to navigate the complexities of their inner and outer worlds with grace and wisdom. However, it would be naive to assume that such a profound societal transformation will unfold without significant resistance. Deeply embedded cultural norms, traditional power structures, and the inertia of centuries of conditioning are formidable adversaries. Men who choose to embody this integrated masculinity may encounter misunderstanding, ridicule, or even hostility from those who cling to outdated ideals of strength and stoicism. The very act of expressing vulnerability or prioritizing emotional and spiritual well-being can be perceived as weakness or a deviation from expected gender roles, leading to social ostracization or a questioning of one's manhood. Furthermore, systemic barriers, ranging from inadequate mental health resources to cultural narratives propagated by media that reinforce hyper-masculine stereotypes, can impede progress. It is precisely in confronting this resistance that the collective dimension of integration becomes paramount. The isolated individual, however resolute, may falter, but a supportive community, a network of like-minded men and allies, can provide the necessary solidarity, validation, and courage to persevere. This resistance, rather than being a deterrent, should be reframed as an indicator of the depth of the challenge and the profound significance of the work. It underscores the ongoing necessity for advocacy, education, and the creation of safe, inclusive spaces where new forms of masculinity can be explored, celebrated, and normalized. Indeed, the imperative for integrated masculinity transcends national borders and cultural particularities, presenting itself as a global necessity. In an interconnected world facing shared challenges, from climate change and resource scarcity to widespread social inequities and conflicts, a more integrated and compassionate male presence is not merely desirable, it is essential. When men are liberated from the constraints of emotional suppression and connected to their deeper spiritual truths, they are less prone to destructive aggression, more inclined toward collaborative problem-solving, and more capable of empathic understanding across cultural divides. The universal principles of self-awareness, compassion, and the pursuit of meaning, articulated through diverse psychological and spiritual traditions, offer a common language for human flourishing that can bridge differences and foster genuine global partnership. This vision extends beyond merely preventing harm. It inspires men to become active stewards of the planet, advocates for justice, and compassionate leaders in humanitarian efforts, contributing their unique gifts to the collective well-being of all humanity. Ultimately, the journey toward integrated masculinity is not a destination, but an ongoing, dynamic process, a continuous evolution that demands sustained commitment, both individually and collectively. The spiritual hygiene and psychological maintenance we outlined in Chapter 7 must extend into the collective sphere, requiring communities and societies to constantly evaluate their values, challenge their assumptions, and adapt their structures to better support the authentic flourishing of all men. This necessitates not only individual practice, but also the creation of robust support systems, advocacy networks, and cultural spaces that champion these new paradigms. We must actively cultivate environments where emotional expression is celebrated, where vulnerability is seen as courage, and where the deep spiritual yearning for connection and meaning is honored as fundamental to the human experience. The promise of a future shaped by integrated masculinity is one of profound beauty and resilience. It is a future where men are not defined by rigid expectations or superficial achievements, but by the depth of their character, the authenticity of their relationships, and the wisdom of their contributions. It is a world where the hidden psychology of men is no longer hidden, but understood, honored, and integrated into a holistic vision of humanity. We envision a society where boys are raised with a full spectrum of emotional and spiritual intelligence, where men are empowered to lead with both strength and compassion, and where the collective human endeavor is enriched by the full, vibrant expression of the sacred masculine in harmonious partnership with the sacred feminine. This is the enduring quest, the continuous evolution toward a more authentic, purposeful, and interconnected existence for all, where the hidden depths of men become a wellspring of profound healing and transformative possibility for the entire world. The preceding chapters have elucidated the profound individual and relational transformations inherent in the integration of the masculine psyche. Yet the true zenith of this endeavor extends far beyond the personal and the familial, culminating in a radical reshaping of the collective human experience. We posit that the integration of men, understood as the conscious harmonization of their psychological depths and spiritual yearnings, is not merely a path to individual well-being, but a foundational pillar for constructing a more just, compassionate, and sustainable global civilization. This is the ultimate aspiration of our inquiry, to comprehend how the internal alchemy of the individual man can externalize into a new architecture for human flourishing. Observe the contemporary global landscape rife with socio-political fragmentation, ecological crises, and a pervasive undercurrent of existential disquiet. Many of these systemic challenges, we contend, bear the indelible imprint of an unintegrated masculinity, a paradigm characterized by an overemphasis on dominance, relentless competition, emotional suppression, and a disconnection from the intrinsic value of interdependence. When men are conditioned to perceive strength solely through the lens of imperviousness and control, the collective suffers from a deficit of empathy, a paucity of collaborative vision, and an inability to address complex problems with the nuanced wisdom they demand. The global imperative, therefore, is not simply to fix men, but to recognize that their holistic integration offers a crucial leverage point for ameliorating many of the world's most pressing issues. Consider, for instance, the pervasive nature of global conflict and the often aggressive posturing that characterizes international relations. An integrated masculinity rooted in emotional literacy and profound understanding of interconnectedness would naturally recalibrate approaches to diplomacy and peacemaking. Leaders embodying an authentic strength derived from self-awareness rather than external validation would be less prone to ego-driven escalation and more inclined towards empathetic negotiation, seeking mutually beneficial outcomes rather than zero-sum victories. The capacity for deep listening, cultivated through years of internal work, would translate into a heightened ability to comprehend diverse perspectives, fostering genuine dialogue even amidst profound disagreement. Such leadership would not shy away from decisive action, but would ground it in a comprehensive assessment of human and environmental impact, reflecting a mature ethical framework. Moreover, the ecological crisis, perhaps the most urgent challenge of our era, is intrinsically linked to a worldview often associated with an unintegrated masculine drive for extraction and control over nature. When man perceives himself as separate from and superior to the natural world, rather than an integral part of its delicate web, exploitation becomes an almost inevitable consequence. The integrated man, having cultivated an embodied presence and a spiritual connection to the sacredness of all life, approaches the environment with reverence and stewardship. His internal harmony with self and others extends outwards to an ecological consciousness, recognizing that the health of the planet is inseparable from human well-being. This shift from a dominator mentality to one of guardianship and reciprocity has the potential to unlock innovative, sustainable solutions that honor both human needs and planetary integrity. Beyond conflict and environmental degradation, the integration of men promises to recalibrate our economic and social justice paradigms. A system driven by unchecked ambition and the relentless pursuit of individual gain, often at the expense of communal welfare, reflects a deep-seated insecurity and a perceived scarcity that integrated men are uniquely positioned to transcend. When men are no longer defined by their material acquisitions or their positional power, but by their character, their contributions, and the depth of their relationships, the foundational values of society begin to shift. Empathy, cultivated through the arduous journey of confronting one's own shadow and embracing vulnerability, becomes a catalyst for advocating for equitable distribution of resources, dismantling systemic inequalities, and fostering inclusive communities where every individual's inherent dignity is recognized and upheld. The drive for success transforms from a relentless climb up a hierarchical ladder to a collaborative effort to elevate the collective. This profound recalibration necessitates a concurrent shift in cultural narratives, the very stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be a man, and by extension, what it means to be human. For too long, media, educational systems, and even familial law have perpetuated narrow archetypes: the stoic warrior, the detached provider, the emotionally impervious leader. The integrated man, however, offers a richer, more complex tapestry of masculinity. He is the conscious leader who inspires through wisdom and compassion, the nurturing father who models emotional intelligence, the authentic partner who engages in profound intimacy, and the community builder who prioritizes collaboration over competition. The task of reframing these narratives is monumental, requiring intentional effort across all societal sectors. Educational institutions must evolve to foster emotional literacy from early childhood, integrating curricula that celebrate diverse expressions of masculinity and challenge harmful stereotypes. Media, from film to digital platforms, bears a significant responsibility to portray integrated male archetypes, showcasing vulnerability as strength, empathy as wisdom, and collaboration as a powerful form of leadership. Policymakers, influenced by an increasingly integrated citizenry, would be compelled to design frameworks that support holistic well-being, valuing mental health, relational health, and community cohesion as much as economic output. Yet, we must acknowledge that such a transformative shift will not unfold without resistance. The inertia of entrenched systems and the comfort of familiar paradigms create powerful headwinds. There will be those who perceive this evolution as an erosion of traditional values, a threat to established power structures, or a weakening of the masculine essence itself. This resistance may manifest as backlash, skepticism, or even outright hostility from those who benefit from the existing order, or who find security in rigid definitions of identity. The shadow of collective integration, much like the individual shadow, will surface in the form of fear, denial, and a clinging to outdated modes of being. Navigating this resistance requires not only unwavering conviction, but also profound empathy for those who struggle with change, recognizing that their reactions often stem from their own unintegrated wounds and fears. It calls for patience, persistent dialogue, and the courageous modeling of the very values we seek to instantiate. Despite these challenges, the vision of a new social fabric woven from the threads of integrated masculinity remains compelling. It envisions communities where authentic communication is the norm, where mentorship transcends mere skill transfer to encompass the transmission of emotional and spiritual wisdom, and where restorative practices replace punitive ones, fostering healing and reconciliation over retribution. It is a society where men are not isolated by their struggles, but supported by robust networks of brotherhood, where vulnerability is seen as a conduit for deeper connection, and where the collective pursuit of meaning supersedes individual acquisition. The ultimate promise of this collective integration is not a utopian fantasy, but a dynamic, evolving state of human civilization, where men, having reclaimed their full humanity, contribute to a world characterized by profound empathy, sustainable stewardship, and genuine interconnectedness. It is a future where the strength of men is measured not by their capacity for dominance, but by their ability to foster growth, cultivate wisdom, and build bridges of understanding across divides. This ongoing journey, demanding continuous vigilance, communal support, and unwavering resilience, is the grand project of our time. It is the architectural blueprint for a flourishing civilization built upon the solid foundation of men who have dared to explore their unseen depths and bravely chosen to live from a place of holistic integration, thereby enriching the very fabric of human existence. The preceding chapters have meticulously charted the intricate terrain of men's hidden psychology, from its subterranean origins in individual conditioning and societal constructs to its profound implications for relational dynamics and global well-being. We have articulated a vision wherein the integration of the fragmented masculine through radical self-awareness and courageous vulnerability serves as a foundational pillar for a more just and compassionate civilization. Yet the realization of such a transformative potential is not a singular event but an enduring odyssey, demanding unceasing vigilance, a sustained commitment to collective dialogue, and the deliberate cultivation of environments that nurture authentic self-discovery. This concluding exploration, therefore, ventures into the practical and philosophical architectures required to not only initiate but to perpetually sustain this profound reorientation of the masculine spirit, recognizing that the deepest shifts occur not in isolated epiphanies, but through the continuous interwoven practice of individual introspection and collective engagement. This collective dialogue, far from being a mere exchange of ideas or a superficial policy debate, represents a profound societal repatterning, a conscious, arduous effort to dismantle centuries of performative stoicism and emotional reticence that have calcified around the male experience. It necessitates the establishment of expansive, psychologically safe platforms, be they community forums, digital commons, therapeutic groups, or institutional initiatives, where the myriad expressions of masculinity can be explored without judgment, where vulnerability is not merely tolerated, but celebrated as a potent conduit for genuine connection and shared humanity. Such dialogues must transcend simplistic binaries and delve into the intricate psychosocial roots of masculine conditioning, exploring the subtle, often unconscious interplay of neurobiology, cultural narratives, and historical trauma. This requires inviting a multi-generational, intersectional perspective that acknowledges the diverse experiences of men across varied cultural, ethnic, socio-economic, and sexual landscapes, allowing for a nuanced understanding that resists monolithic categorization. It is in these shared spaces, forged in empathy, intellectual humility, and a courageous willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, that the collective unconscious begins to shed its archaic patterns, making way for a more expansive, inclusive, and ultimately more accurate understanding of what it means to embody the masculine principle in the contemporary world. This is an epistemological shift, an ontological reorientation, demanding a collective hermeneutic framework that prioritizes lived experience and authentic expression over prescribed roles. The cultivation of supportive environments, intrinsically linked to the efficacy of collective dialogue, extends beyond mere intellectual discourse into the tangible structures and daily rhythms of life. These are spaces, both physical and psychological, where men are not only permitted but actively encouraged to explore their inner worlds, to articulate their emotional landscapes without fear of reprisal or emasculation, and to seek guidance for their deepest yearnings. Consider, for instance, the profound impact of mentorship programs that pair seasoned, integrated men with younger generations, offering not just career advice but a living example of the embodied wisdom, emotional intelligence, and spiritual groundedness, a transmission of a healthier lineage. Envision educational curricula from early childhood through higher learning that integrate emotional literacy, conflict resolution, and contemplative practices as core components, thereby equipping boys and young men with the foundational tools for holistic self-development from an early age, preempting the very conditions that necessitate the hidden psychology we have sought to illuminate. Imagine workplaces that prioritize psychological safety and foster cultures where vulnerability is seen as a strength, where leadership is defined by empathetic presence and collaborative spirit rather than hierarchical dominance or ruthless competition. These environments are the fertile ground upon which the seeds of authentic masculinity can take root and flourish, offering refuge from the isolating pressures of traditional gender roles and serving as laboratories for new ways of being and relating, fostering a sense of belonging and mutual support that is often absent in conventional male socialization. The journey of integration, we must reiterate with unwavering emphasis, is not a finite destination but an ongoing process, demanding a continuous and rigorous commitment to what we have termed spiritual hygiene and psychological maintenance. The deeply entrenched patterns of emotional suppression, dismissive avoidant attachment, and the unintegrated Jungian shadow, often reinforced by pervasive societal norms and the inertia of habit, do not simply dissipate. They require persistent attention, mindful awareness, and a courageous willingness to re-engage with discomfort and introspection. This ongoing vigilance is an active stance, a deliberate cultivation of self-compassion, resilience, and metacognitive awareness in the face of inevitable regressions, external challenges, or the insidious re-emergence of old conditioning. It involves a regular, conscious return to the foundational practices outlined previously: embodied presence, narrative expression, authentic relational engagement, and personalized ritual, not as rote exercises, but as living, adaptive disciplines that evolve with the individual's growth and changing circumstances. Furthermore, it necessitates drawing deeply from the wellsprings of perennial wisdom traditions, which offer not only sophisticated frameworks for inner peace and ethical conduct, but also robust methodologies for navigating the existential vicissitudes of the human condition, fostering an enduring sense of purpose and meaning that transcends transient external circumstances and cultural shifts. Perhaps one of the most profound and far-reaching implications of this integrative work lies in its intergenerational imperative. Integrated men, having embarked upon and sustained their own journeys of self-discovery and shadow integration, become living embodiments of a new paradigm of masculinity, capable of breaking insidious, often unconscious cycles of emotional illiteracy, inherited trauma, and unexamined gender roles that have plagued generations. They model for their sons, daughters, and indeed, for all younger generations, a masculinity rooted not in dominance, performative stoicism, or emotional detachment, but in empathetic presence, courageous vulnerability, and a profound connection to their inner lives and the broader web of existence. They teach through example and conscious guidance that true strength resides in emotional fluency and relational capacity, that wisdom emerges from introspection and self-awareness, and that authentic power is found in service, collaboration, and a deep reverence for life. This is not merely about transmitting knowledge, it is about cultivating a legacy of holistic well-being, fostering environments where future generations are encouraged to explore their full emotional, psychological, and spiritual spectrums from infancy, thereby preempting the very conditions that necessitate the hidden psychology we have sought to illuminate. The ripples of this intergenerational shift extend outwards, transforming familial bonds, educational systems, and ultimately the collective consciousness itself, seeding a future where emotional intelligence and spiritual groundedness are as valued as intellectual prowess. As men reclaim their full humanity, integrating their psychological depths with their spiritual yearnings, the impact reverberates far beyond the individual and the immediate family, extending into the very fabric of global civilization. The shift from a paradigm of control, extraction, and individualistic competition to one of stewardship, reciprocity, and collaborative co-creation, a hallmark of integrated masculinity, becomes profoundly crucial in addressing the pressing planetary ecological crisis. Leaders imbued with empathetic wisdom and a holistic understanding of interconnectedness are more apt to prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term gain, to forge collaborative, transnational solutions to complex environmental challenges, and to foster a deeper, almost sacred, reverence for the intricate balance of all life. Similarly, in the realm of international relations and conflict resolution, a masculinity that has courageously embraced its own vulnerabilities and integrated its shadows is less prone to aggressive posturing, zero-sum thinking, and simplistic militaristic solutions, and more inclined towards diplomacy, mutual understanding, and the pursuit of equitable restorative justice. The capacity for nuanced thought, for compassionate listening, for courageous vulnerability and negotiation, and for holding paradox, all tenets of the integrated man, becomes an indispensable asset in navigating geopolitical complexities, fostering cross-cultural dialogue, and building bridges of understanding where walls of division and suspicion once stood. This is the profound systemic contribution of the integrated masculine, not merely a personal transformation, but a foundational recalibration of humanity's relationship with itself, with other species, and with the living planet. Thus, the journey into the hidden psychology of men culminates in a vision of sacred reciprocity. As men courageously embark upon the path of healing themselves, they simultaneously contribute to the profound healing of the world. Their once hidden depths, previously sources of unacknowledged pain, societal dysfunction, and personal fragmentation, are transmuted into wellsprings of profound wisdom, generative strength, and compassionate action. This is not a utopian fantasy disconnected from the realities of human nature, but a tangible, achievable future, predicated on the sustained commitment of individuals and communities to embark upon and robustly support this transformative work. It is a future where masculinity is not a rigid, suffocating cage of archaic expectations, but a dynamic, fluid, and multifaceted expression of human potential, diverse in its manifestations, yet unified in its core principles of integrity, empathy, purpose, and spiritual attunement. We envision a world where men, fully present to their own inner landscapes and deeply connected to their authentic selves, are empowered to co-create a civilization that honors the sacredness of all beings, that fosters genuine interdependent connection, and that stands resilient and adaptable in the face of future challenges. The call for ongoing vigilance, collective dialogue, and the creation of supportive environments is not merely an academic proposition. It is an urgent, existential invitation to participate in the conscious evolution of humanity, leveraging the profound, often unseen depths of men's experience as a powerful catalyst for a future defined by wholeness, harmony, and enduring hope.